we know that for champagne lover, when people are beginning to be interested in champagne, they are thinking about vintage, and the more they know, the more they want to know, and the more there are interesting dates of disgorgement. Is it a fresh disgorgement? Is it the original disgorgement? Because you can have many differences, and it's always interesting to understand why you have these differences, why the wine is like that. And I will not say that one is better than the other one. Both are always incredible.
Late disgorged champagnes. Can you explain why is the date important on the bottle? How important is it? And what does a champagne lover need to know?
Wow, maybe I will need 1 hour to explain everything about late disgorgement, because it's, the disgorgement is the last step in the champagne process, because we're going to disgorge wine, we're going to add some sugar, and we put a cork, and it will be finished. After, it will just have the labeling, but the wine will be ready for a short or long aging. So this disgorgement is very important. It's always very interesting to have the date of disgorgement, because it will give an idea about this operation. And we know in champagne that if you want to appreciate a lot champagne, you need at least 6 months of disgorgement for a multi-vintage champagne. And for a vintage, at Lanson we say at least 2 years, sometimes 3 years, to be sure that the wine will be good after the disgorgement. That's why we think it's very interesting to see these dates. For champagne lovers, it can be also very interesting, because many champagne lovers will not wait only 6 months or 3 years. For people who love champagne, and especially vintage champagnes, sometimes they will wait 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and they will be very interested in the dates of disgorgement. So sometimes it can be as you say, the original disgorgement, so recent disgorgement, and sometimes it can be a very late disgorgement when you disgorge a champagne 20 years, 30 years, 40 years after its bottling.
So is that something then, would you say that if, like for say you're going to do a champagne tasting with friends, and you had for the same champagne, you had different disgorgement dates, would that be interesting to do? Or could you just say, oh, well, listen, we're going to get together once a year and taste the same champagne with the same disgorgement date, and then we're going to taste it year to year. Would that be interesting?
Yes. Yeah. No, I understand what you mean, but I need to, because there are many answers. Okay. I need to give one example.
Give me one example. Obviously, this is a complicated one.
At Lanson, for example, we have a huge library of old vintages. For example, I take one vintage, 1976. So it's a 50 years old vintage, 51 years old vintage. So when you are talking about dates of disgorgement, for example, 1976, at the origin, this vintage has been sold at Lanson in 1986. So when we sold it in 1986, this wine has been disgorged. So it means that if you still have bottles of this original disgorgement, so it will be a disgorgement from 1986. Okay? We still have this kind of bottles and magnums at Lanson kept in our library, and they are all disgorgement. But you can have also fresh disgorgement. I mean, some 1976 that we kept during 50 years on lease, sur pointe, as we say in Champagne, that we disgorged, and we had 3 grams of sugar and a new cork. So in this case, we are talking about late disgorgement. So if you come to visit us, I can do this exercise of tasting an old disgorgement, so made in 1986, and a fresh disgorgement made this year of the same vintage. And you will understand and you will see the difference. So with the old disgorgement, you will have a wine that will be incredible, very complex, where you will have a lot of generosity, complexity, and 1976 is famous for that. But the example I take can be also the example of many other vintage. When you take an old disgorgement, you always have a little bit more complexity than a fresh disgorgement. Why? Because when you disgorge an old vintage, a fresh disgorgement, you will open the bottle, so you will have an oxidation. Because even if you have gas in the bottle, you have a kind of oxidation that is coming in the bottle or in the magnum, and the wine will need to have rest. The wine will need to have rest to be sure that the wine will be able to recover from this oxidation. And it will take between 2 and 3 years for the fresh disgorgement. Why? Because in fact, I always give this image. When we are disgorging a bottle, we say we operate the bottle. And it's easy to understand. When you operate a young vintage, for example, this 76 disgorged in 86, it was a young guy, so it was easy to recover. When you operate 76 in 2025, it's an old guy, so he needs time to recover. That's why late disgorgement will need at least 2-3 years, but you will manage to find an incredible quality after 2 or 3 years of late disgorgement. So this is a big difference between fresh original disgorgement and late disgorgement, because you will have this shock oxidative where the wine will need to recover. But after this 2-3 years, if you compare both will have huge qualities because they will be able to compare together.
I can see it's complex, but I can also understand why people become a bit obsessed with the disgorgement dates and late disgorgement.
Yes, when you're a champagne lover, we know that for champagne lover, when people are beginning to be interested in champagne, they are thinking about vintage, and the more they know, the more they want to know, and the more there are interesting dates of disgorgement. Is it a fresh disgorgement? Is it the original disgorgement? Because you can have many differences, and it's always interesting to understand why you have these differences, why the wine is like that. And I will not say that one is better than the other one. Both are always incredible.
Okay. Well, this brings me to your two collections, the vintage collection and the noble champagne collection. So what is the differences between the two?
No differences at all. It's just the quality of the wine that is different, because Lanson vintage collection is made with the classic vintage, and noble vintage collection is made with noble champagne. So the blend is different. Vintage champagne is made with a blend of 50, 52, 53% Pinot Noir to 47, 46% of Chardonnay, when noble champagne is made at first by a high percentage of Chardonnay, 70% of Chardonnay, 30% of Pinot Noir. And we also have noble Blanc de Blanc collection.
Okay.
Pure Chardonnay.
And my next question was about the private collection program. So you started this last year, where people are allowed to have a personal cellar of vintage Lanson. Am I correct? Up to 300 bottles, something like that?
Yes. In fact, I can tell you the story of this project. 4 years ago, we decided to reorganize the Lanson collection of many different vintage. We have one of the biggest collection of all vintage at Lanson that was spread in our 7 kilometers of galleries, and we decided to to remove all these different bottles. And by removing all these bottles or magnums, in some conditions, we found some problems with old vintage. I think about 59, for example, 42, where we had some problems of fire, of cork, or some level of in the wine. And we decided to take our time to do things in better conditions, and to be able to organize the collection by having only perfect bottles, perfect magnums. So we take our time to restore all the collection. But at this time, it was with no ideas about creating this private cellar. And we knew the level of stocks that we had, but after all this work of restoration, we were amazed by the quantities, by the potential that we had. And we said it would be a pity not to give the occasion to champagne lovers to have the ability to buy a private cellar. And the idea was at first to preserve our legacy by keeping bottles and magnum for us, and with a system of allocation to be able to propose to champagne lovers to buy and to own a private cellar at Lanson. So the idea is with vintage between 1921 today and 2013 to be able to buy some bottles, magnums of Lanson vintage or noble champagne, even Clos Lanson, that they will be able to keep in Lanson cellar. So people can buy at least 150 bottles, the maximum 300 bottles of different vintages. So we can help them to make their choice. Of course, you have some vintage where there are all allocation, for example, 1921, 1942, 1952, 59. It will not be 150 bottles because we have a system of allocation. But you can choose your different vintages, and the minimum will be 150 bottles. And people who are invested, they will have the guarantee that the bottles will be kept in perfect condition. They will have a key. We'll give them a key, and they will be the owner of this Lanson private cellar. They will be able to come when they want with a special hospitality service where it will be possible to come with family or friends to take a bottle or a magnum and to taste it in better conditions. We'll be also able to send them a bottle of or a magnum if they want to have one vintage at home. And it's something that we launched in May 2025, and we already sold 16 different private cellars to different champagne lovers coming from different countries, from America, from Europe. It's incredible, but it's a very special thing, and it's an incredible universe. To meet people who are interested in champagne lover, you meet incredible people. I am fascinated by some people who are incredible champagne lovers, who know how the champagne is aging and who are very big fan of champagne. We meet very special people thanks to this project.
I thought it was a really interesting way to literally invite people in to Maison Lanson.
That's an incredible thing that we can propose to champagne lovers. But we often say that there is one thing that you can't buy, even if you have a lot of money, you can't buy time. And even if you have a lot of money, and if you want to buy a 1921, you need to find it. At Lanson, we are very lucky because during many years, the family, the different owners of Lanson, always kept many bottles and magnums from different vintages. That's why today we have an incredible treasure in our library, and that's why we can do that, because we have the quantities, because we can propose all these different qualities, and also because we are very confident about the quality, because we did all this project of restoration, because we We have a huge know-how, a great experience about all vintages, and we did many tasting by learning how all the different vintages are evolving. So it's a new project, but that took place many years ago with the experience and know-how of Lanson. We are there because there is an history. It's not like that we created this project.
So I have a question then about storage. What is the perfect temperature for our listeners to store their champagne at, and the perfect temperature for serving?
To store the champagne, the best is to be at the temperature of our cellar, or between 10 and 12 degrees. And after, to serve it, it will depend on the quality of your champagne. I would say for a vintage, all vintage, it's always better around 12 degrees. When I say all vintage, I want to say after 30 years of aging. And after, for a classic vintage, between 8 and 10, and classic champagne around 6 degrees.
Okay.
But always to be careful with the temperature, because it will depend also on seasons and where you are living. It's always better to be a little bit fresher than too warm, because you will not be able to return. When you are a little bit too cold, you take your time. When it's not fresh enough, it can be a problem. Except if you have some ice and a bucket, it will be good. But all vintage don't like ice bucket. You need to have the perfect temperature as soon as the beginning.
Okay. So let's imagine an all champagne dinner. I'm a proponent of all champagne dinners. So what would you serve and what would you pour? What would, from beginning to end, a starter, a main dish, your cheese, and dessert? What would you serve? What would you choose? What are your favorite things?
Wow. Do I need to serve Lanson champagne,
You're
or
going
do
to
you
serve
just want
your
to know?
competitors' champagne.
Yes, no, but
no.
Because for the aperitif, always, according to me, the best is always a Chardonnay champagne. So it can be a classic Blanc de Blanc from Lanson that will wake up your mouth with its freshness, delicate flavors around citrus, around white flower. It will be very good. After, you begin by seafood. So why not a lobster? And why not, it can be, if you want to be a little bit more simple, you can take scallops. It will be perfect. Scallops are always perfect, because you can cook them very easily, and sometimes you can do something that is a little bit more complex, but it will always work with champagne. And I think about Noble Blanc de Blanc champagne, or even Noble 2012, and Clos Lanson 2010, for example, with a lobster will be perfect, because you will have this balance between the seafood. You know, you have these salty iodic notes that are coming from Chardonnay, and especially from the chalky soil, that are always very interesting to be balanced with food. After that, why not to have volaille, poultry,
white meat,
with some nice poultry with nice mushroom, and you can think about a vintage. Each vintage, why not 2012 or 2013? Okay. After that, you can have some cheese, nice cheese.
What cheeses do you pair with champagne?
And if you want to have something, yes, cheese are very interesting with champagne. You can think about Parmigiano, Comté, Beaufort, Chaours, cheese from Champagne. And when I think cheese and champagne, I think about old champagne. I love to taste old Comté, Parmigiano, with some old champagne. So why not from the 90s or the 80s? It will be absolutely perfect.
Okay.
And after that, you have the dessert. So the dessert, if you really want to have a champagne, I would think about pink champagne that could be served with red fruits. It can be a kind of salad or red fruits like a tart. That will be also very interesting.
Okay, that sounds absolutely delicious. So two questions. What is the oldest bottle of champagne you have at Lanson? And what is the oldest champagne you've tasted?
The oldest we have at Lanson is 1904. I never tasted it because we only have 6 bottles. So it will be for, I don't know.
Someday.
But it will be for the future. So I will not open it. And the oldest I tasted at Lanson was 1911.
And how was that? Is it memorable?
Fantastic. It was very good. It was moving to think about people who made it. The taste was absolutely incredible. The color at first was very impressive because a kind of amber color without any bubbles when you serve it. But in the mouth, you can feel something that it's just a little bit fizzy. But the taste is very impressive because you have a lot of nutty notes. It's very special. It's a taste that you always remember because it's very fascinating. It's so strong, so far from the classic taste of champagne because you drink a kind of liqueur, but that is still very tasty and very fresh. What is always impressive with old champagne is the level of freshness that you have. So 11 was fantastic for the taste, but also when you think about the history, 11 before the First World War, you think about people at this time who made one. They didn't have the knowledge that we had in the vineyard, in the winery, but they managed to do something that was incredible. So they already knew a lot of things. So it gives you a lot of respect.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time today. That was a really fascinating talk. Thank you for joining us. I hope we'll have you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining me for part 2 of my interview with Hervé Dantan. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you will look at our many other podcasts. We talk to people all around the world, and I think we cover such a wide range of topics. There's something there for everybody. Now, this podcast is produced in partnership with Wine Voices from Wine Searcher, the world's largest wine and spirits database, and we can offer you a discount. You can get 10% off a 12-month Wine Searcher Pro subscription with the code JaneWS at checkout. That's JaneWS. Just follow the link in the description to get started.